Hey, welcome back to into today's video, doing JMA Friday today, having a look at the weather for the coming month. I thought this would take us to August, but it doesn't. Not quite. It takes us to the 31st of July, so to the very last day of the month. But we had that very hot weather, of course, on Wednesday. The temperatures have slid away a little bit since then. We're not quite a bit off the central temperature, actually, from the Thursday to the second day. I'll have a look at that. Be interesting to see where things go, then, as we go through July, whether that extreme heat that we had on the first day of the month, whether it's just like a one-off and just a blip, or whether actually it's a trend of the summer, and we'll see hotter conditions coming back. It'll be interesting to see what the longer range models are showing. But before I get on with that, just to say about the ads, there's links to articles on all the pages at gazzaviz.com. Have a browse through the widgets. If there's any articles that you're interested in, please click through and you'll be helping to pay for the website, and thanks very much for doing that. Later on, I'll return on Stormwatch one last time, because I think the heat wave is going to be on its way out as we get into the weekend. But we've got one last very warm afternoon to come this afternoon. Remember, risk of thunderstorm tonight, so there'll be one last update for Stormwatch tonight, so we'll come back for that this evening. Right, let's get on with the video then, and we're going to start off, as I say, with the central temperature. Now, I did the update yesterday and started with the central temperature just for the first day of July, and it stood, I think it was something like 24.5, something like that. Well, now, taking into account the first and the second days of July, now we stand at 21.4, so still way above the all-time July record and monthly record Central England temperature, which was set back in July 2006. Still way above that, but significantly lower. But yes, we lost about than the first day of the month. We lost about 3 degrees yesterday off the temperature. So instead of an anomaly of 8.8 as it was showing yesterday, absolutely insane anomaly, today we're at 5.8 degrees above average. Still a very, very significant temperature anomaly, that, but not quite as ridiculous as nearly 9 degrees above the 30-year average. So it'll be interesting where that goes. I think the general trend over the next week or so will be to slide that down into more sensible levels. Although probably even by this time next week, will probably still be fairly well above average. Okay, let's have a look at the Japanese model then. These are the 500 millibar heights broken down into weekly periods. The first week period will take us from where we are today, the 3rd, through to the 10th of July. As you know, 500 millibar heights, blue is extrapolated to low pressure, and orange, yellow, red extrapolates to high pressure. There is one model, the Brazilian seasonal model, that is different and flips that around just to catch me out, I think. But other than that one, all the other ones are blue to low pressure and orange, yellow and red to high pressure. So what we see for the coming weeks, that we've got a trough of low pressure in the middle part of the Atlantic. We've got quite a bit of northern blocking up over Greenland. That's normally quite a bad sign, but because we've got this ridge sitting to the south and to the east of the country in this sort of position, actually the flow with this is going rather like that. So well, we are bringing the jet stream down towards the country, I think, as we go through into next week. So it will be a more changeable week. But it's not going to be a washout by any means, and most of the unsettled conditions will be in the north and west, with the south and the east getting the driest weather, and the warmest weather will be down in the southeast as well, close to this area of high pressure. I don't think we'll be going back to the significant and frankly quite over the top heat that we had on the 1st of July. I don't think we'll go back to that, but it will be pleasantly warm at times down in the south. Though later on next week we may see the temperatures beginning to slide away perhaps. As we go through to the second weekly period, this one takes us from the 10th to the 17th of July, so through the middle part of the month. Same sort of setup, but maybe a little bit more unsettled if anything. We have still got some ridging down to the south and to the southeast of the country, but low pressure is to the north of Scotland, and the jet stream is generally running through the country rather like that. Now, because the ridge is quite close to the south and southeast, again, I think southern parts of the country will likely get the driest of the weather, but I think we are at risk there through the middle part of July of moving the jet stream down, moving it through the country, so it perhaps turns more unsettled through that period, and even the south and east could be at risk, perhaps of a little bit of rain through that middle part of July. Not a washout though, don't be running away with the idea that this is summer going down the pan, because I do think that with that ridge very close to the south-southeast, it will keep a lot of dry weather going, but just that we're running the jet stream into the country a little bit more on that setup. And then as we go through to the last 2 week period, it's taking us from the 17th to the 31st of July. This is rather a different one, and it's showing a trough setting up over Scandinavia there, and the ridge perhaps going out in towards the Atlantic. So what could be going on with that one is that the jet stream goes rather like that. It's a rather odd one though, and the signals are weak, but I think we're probably beginning to turn things cooler and maybe more unsettled in the second half of July. It's a little bit difficult to interpret quite what is going on there, but the trough is certainly in, or it's developing over Scandinavia. There's signs that the high pressure is sort of going to the west of the country a little bit, so it could be going back to the pattern we had in June, maybe not necessarily all that wet, but it could be going back to the idea of cooler, and for the north anyway, somewhat more unsettled northwesterly winds. But the signal there is quite weak, so I'm not entirely sure about that one. And we see how this breaks down into a temperature forecast for the next month. So the first week period, as we know, is the week that's we're in, the 3rd to the 10th of July. The temperature anomalies are coming out generally warmer than average, near normal in the north, and in those yellow colours down in the south, a little bit above average there. The precipitation anomaly comes out near normal for the south, a little bit wetter than average, perhaps surprisingly, up in the north of the country. So it is turning a little bit more unsettled up in the north. So the next week period, the 10th to the 17th, the temperature anomaly going generally a little bit below average, I think, there. That's as we start to bring the jet stream back in, Pat. So it is turning a bit cooler there. I'm not sure it'll be that cool, but maybe going back nearer to normal through the middle part of the month. The rainfall forecast going a little bit above average, quite widely across the country, actually. I thought in the south, with the ridge close to the south, it probably would protect the south a little bit, but the model is suggesting above average rainfall coming up there for that middle week of July. Not terribly good signals, that, and I'd be surprised if it's quite that bad. I don't think it'll be quite that bad, but that's certainly what the model is suggesting anyway. The final 2 weekly period taking us up to the end of the month. Again, the south is perhaps going a little bit closer to normal, the north still a bit cooler than average, and the rainfall anomaly is drying out a little bit actually, so as the ridge is sort of setting up to the west of the country, as the ridge is setting up there, it's sort of protecting us from the Atlantic really, and although the jet stream is probably going something like that, it does mean that it's a drier final 2 week period. So I don't think we're looking at a disaster of the July there, but certainly not as hot or as dry as it was right at the start of the month. CFS-V2 next, so we'll have a look at the 500 millibar heights, which are broken down again in 2 week periods. So the first week period takes us from the 2nd to the 8th of July. Pretty good representation this of what the JMA was showing. We've got the ridging to the east and to the south of the country, with the trough to the west, and a lot of northern blocking again, which is normally a bad sign in summer. When you get that much red up across Greenland, it's normally a sign that things are really going to go down the tubes. But because we've got this high pressure sitting just to the south and the east of us, that's sort of helping to force a pattern and keep things not too bad. The flow with that one is going rather like that. So again, I think it's the idea that it's turning a little bit more unsettled from the north and west, but the south and the east gets the driest and warmest of the weather. The next weekly period, in agreement with the JMA as well, we've got the ridging men down to the south of the country with this trough of low pressure probably extending in off the Atlantic a little bit more. So the jet stream's coming back a bit through that week from the 9th through to the 15th of July. Again, not a washout, but more unsettled, particularly in the north and the west. The next week period, going from the 16th to 22nd of July, difficult to say what's going on in Bismarck, but probably the ridge is becoming more influential there. Signs of a bit of a trough developing over Scandinavia, and then we've got all this blocking up over Greenland. Now, what could be happening here is that this ridge across France could be retrogressing up towards this ridge over Scandinavia, with this trough forming just here. So reading between the lines, that could be in line with what the JMA is showing action. It could all finish up with some sort of big high pressure there and a trough extending down through there, and obviously that wouldn't be very good because it would turn the winds into the north. But on the face of it, through that week period, probably quite a lot of dry weather. And then the final weekly period, going from the 23rd through the 29th of July, so going right to the end of the month. Well, a little bit difficult again to decide what's going on, but there is a ridge to the south of Greenland. There's another ridge over towards Eastern Europe. There's a trough over Scandinavia, and probably hinting at a trough somewhere around the UK, I would think. I think the jet stream is probably doing something a little bit like that. So we may be bringing the jet stream through the country through to the end of July. Just hints, no more than that, but just hints, I think, between the JMA and the CFS of a cooler and sort of more unsettled final couple of weeks, or maybe final week of the month. Temperature anomalies from the CFS V2 look like this: a warmer than average week coming up in those red colours. Next weekly period stays more or less warmer than average in the south, but goes a bit cooler than average in the north from the 9th to the 15th. The 16th to the 22nd, cooler than average for many parts of the country. The south still close to the warmer than average anomalies, but I think generally that is a cooler week there. And then finally, the 23rd to the 29th, again, probably looking cooler than average for most parts of the country. The south, though, still close to being warmer than average. The rainfall anomalies, a dry week generally coming up this week. And then generally still quite dry through the 9th to the 15th. So when the JMA was turning things wet, and I do think that was a bit pessimistic from the JMA, CFS is showing generally dry conditions coming up there. The next week, 16th to 22nd, weaker signal, but still generally hinting at being quite dry. And then the final week of July, maybe signs of a change, because we've got average precipitation anomalies there. And average, we're going from sort of drier than average through most of July to average rainfall in the final week, which probably hints at a change to wetter, not desperately wet, but wetter conditions. So it's a bit of a mixed bag. It looks like you'll be in for a bit of a mixed July after that very hot opening day. There's no real signal there that we're going to return to that heat. I suppose it's good news if you don't like that sort of extreme heat that we had on the opening day of the month. It looks a bit mixed, but I think overall a lot of dry weather coming up, and once you average it all out, the temperature anomaly will probably still come out a bit above average, but not a classic summer month there. And maybe reading between the lines, hints of a bit of a deterioration taking place somewhere around the latter stages of July. So that's it for now. That's this week's Japanese update done and dusted. We'll do a weekend forecast tomorrow. Come back for that. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.